Hey guys, welcome to Auto Alchemy, the only channel on YouTube that I have. So as some of you know, I was on INTJ and INFP Coffee not too long ago, and I had a really awesome experience. But there was one weird thing about the aftermath of that experience, which really, I don't know, kind of jumped out at me. So as I was browsing through the comments on their video, I saw that somebody said something along the lines of, "I love ENTPs. They're so charming, but unfortunately, they can kind of be tricksters." So I know that that comment was completely well-intentioned and honestly maybe well-founded, but for whatever reason it bothered me, and I think that the reason that it bothered me is because of the pretty hefty grain of truth in there. So ENTPs kind of have a reputation for being hyperbolic and even deceptive at times, and it's weird because I've even seen, not to name any names, but I've seen YouTubers who are ENTPs who almost relish in that, like it's some kind of superpower, like I am so good at weaving this web of lies and manipulating people for my own gain. Like in some ways it's almost usurping the INTJ as the mastermind, and I just think it's really childish. So I'm kind of wrestling with this paradox that on one hand ENTPs are supposed to be these brave firebrands who really strive to articulate the truth, and then on the other hand they're allegedly really deceptive. And look, in making this video, I'm not trying to say that I've never told a white lie or even a larger lie. I think that most human beings at some point have felt backed into a corner, whether they're right about that or not, and they've, just run with the lie. That being said, I try really hard not to lie because I do feel this weird allegiance to capital T truth, whatever that ends up being, and I think that the pursuit of that is actually restorative and in some ways transformative. Plus, I'm really not so deluded that I think I can get away with lying. Like, I'm not high on my own supply in the same way that a lot of ENTPs seem to be.
You know who you are.
So, with all of that said, my agenda in this video is to present a more sympathetic and nuanced account of the so-called ENTP hyperbole. And honestly, I might have just made that up, but it's going to be so-called from here on out. So a big part of the problem, I think, is that ENTPs and maybe just NTPs in general are acutely aware of the fact that reality might be infinitely complex, and our language, therefore, is going to be insufficient at capturing all of the nuances of the world and the way that it works. So we have this allegiance to the truth, but also this recognition that truth is just so far from what we can actually express. And at the same time, ENTPs are fairly balanced between self and tribe, so those middle two functions are usually operating in a healthy way in tandem. And despite what we may say, receiving emotional validation from other people is actually really important to us. So we end up kind of caught between these two different poles where we want to speak the truth to the best of our ability, but if we did that, then we would just load our language with so many qualifiers and make our sentences so mind-numbingly dull and hyper-precise that we would alienate other people. And that sounds like an awful place to be, right? And so we recognize that sometimes language has to be used in a really pragmatic way. And I think that that pragmatism can either be, socially pragmatic, or it can be selfishly pragmatic, which is something to look out for. You know who you are. So the second reason that I think that ENTPs have this reputation is because of our inferior introverted sensing. And introverted sensing, just as a vast conceptual web, includes things like basic bodily maintenance and the ability to lose yourself in a moment and just take responsibility for the work of actually existing in the world. And a lot of that includes being attentive to sensory detail and having this workable memory bank in your head. And so for a lot of ENTPs, I think that the sensory world is kind of perceived as being fluid. It matters a lot less than the intuitive concepts and patterns that they want to play around in. And so you just sort of make the sensory world and fact even subservient to those concepts. I know that I personally have a tendency to say, like, even though this particular set of facts don't support this mental framework that I really like, facts are flexible things. They're always embedded in some kind of worldview, and actually, in my opinion, are undergirded by concepts. So there's no such thing as a concept-free, worldview-free fact. And because we can have such awful memories, I think that the NEFE functions kind of operating together, they can make for fairly good storytelling. And so there's embellishment. There's like filling in those gaps that really there's nothing in our brains that live in those gaps. So we kind of have to improvise in order to make a compelling story. And so the final reason that I see for this ENTP misconception, or maybe just immaculate conception, is the different way that ENTPs use introverted thinking versus how INTPs use introverted thinking. So as a function, introverted thinking is really concerned with mapping or modeling a certain territory for understanding the truth values of different propositions, and also understanding the rules for how something acquires, a true or false value, and how different concepts sort of logically cascade into one another and support one another. So it's creating this universalizing system of thought. And so for the INTP, that is the hero function. That's where their ego really lives. And so they're casting as broad an introverted thinking net as possible, and everything has to be interconnected with everything else in order to get the most truthful picture and accurate picture of reality that they can achieve as non-omnipotent human beings. Now, I think for ENTPs, at least in my own life, what happens with introverted thinking is that we have these different conceptual islands that we're building. So TI is being used in service of extroverted intuition. So it might be that I'm really interested in positive psychology, which I am, and I explore this territory as much as possible, and I kind of see how it operates, and I can create a self-contained logical map of that territory. And then at the same time, maybe I'm vaguely interested in Whiteheadian process philosophy, and so that's a separate territory over here. And I think that ENTPs often fail to try to draw the connections between these islands, and I think that that's actually the key to becoming more truthful and more forthright and more insightful as a human being. And I think that this island concept actually works with other people. Because of our fairly strong extroverted feeling, we get a sense of what's okay to talk about with certain people and what's going to push their buttons. And some ENTPs kind of manipulate that, which, whatever. I just don't find that very interesting. But that's a whole different point. And because we have these different islands of self-contained truth, we can say something in the context of one conversation that is true, or approximately true, given the parameters of that conversation and the shared history and the level of intimacy you have with the conversational partner, and what you're willing to divulge and what you're not willing to divulge, etc., 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 blah, 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 blah. We can say one thing in one conversation and something else in another conversation that seems to conflict entirely with the thing you were saying in the other conversation. So, to an outsider, that looks like straight up deception, and maybe sometimes it is. But I think that the real issue and the key to escaping this sort of stereotype is for ENTPs to put in the work to try to connect the dots between these different islands, which amounts to thinking through definitions of concepts and moving to a broad and more abstract level so that you can figure out the rules for how things actually connect. I think that we build these introverted thinking islands on this ocean of extroverted intuition, but But if you look under the ocean, you're going to find out that all of these islands are actually connected. If we strive for unification of all of our different concepts, then we'll actually become stronger, more awesome, more straightforward people. And that's what I'm trying to do here, okay? So that's about all that I have to say. If you enjoyed this video, please like. If you're not subscribed already and you want to see more content that's vaguely similar, then please subscribe. No one's stopping you but yourself and your own self-limiting beliefs, okay? So anyway, this is the last time that I try to film a video early in the morning. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time.